Welcome back to another episode of the Anatomy of the Trade. Today we're discussing another trade of Francis in KE Holdings. Let's just jump right into this. So Franz, please take us through this trade.
Okay. Well, if you look at the weekly chart that we've got in the little box there on the left, we can see that this is a relatively newcomer to the market. It was an IPO back in August, and a very strong rally out of the IPO tells you that there's definite interest, a lot of buying right at the actual offering. Buying kind of drops off, and rather than a sort of a climactic move, it's one of these rallies that just runs out of gas, and makes demand. It's a demand absent rather than a supply present kind of climax. So, but anyway, it reaches the high, it pulls back into a trading range. There's an obvious change of behavior bar, that big bar, and underneath it says WL. Well, that's when it came on my watch list. So I'm looking at it. We're going across the trading range, and I think at this point we can kind of go over and actually look at the trade itself on the daily, don't you think? I mean, that's the setup, the backdrop. So we're in this trading range. And pretty well defined support resistance levels, and you can see that there's really, in phase A, there's really only one significant bar with a whole lot of selling in it, and it's actually got demand as well, because you can see what happens at the support level. That would be around November the 17th, 18th, somewhere in there. But the bar before that shows some ease of movement, and it's one of those bars that you've pointed out many times. It's got a wide spread. It's something that's going to need to be overcome going forward in order for the bias, which, by the way, coming into this, very, very strong uptrend. So we're thinking initially that the bias here is bullish, that we're in a reaccumulation. But at any rate, this area is going to have to be overcome for the bias to be confirmed. So right there. And you can see that after the big supply in phase A, phase B, there's not a whole lot of buying and selling going on. It dries up pretty quickly, although we're not initially able to overcome that area, and that just tells you that there's still some profit taking, and there's still be some skepticism about what valuation. But on that last reaction back down to support, there's a pretty strong rally following that up through that down bar, which negates it. But it can't hold. So again, we see some supply coming in around the end of January, and down into that, we don't even make a lower. I mean, we stop prior to the support. We're making a higher low, and that looks bullish to me. So that's my entry for the first one of my positions. So I get in there, and my stop, I'm setting the stop below kind of the range, and I think this is going to prove to be an issue later, as we'll see. But at any rate, we do get some continuation. We get confirmation that this wants to go higher. So I'm still thinking this is phase C, and the entry for my second position that I want to add in the trading range occurs there around February I think it's February the 9th. Yeah, February the 9th. So I've got my half position that I want to have during the trading range, and we get continuation. We up to resistance, and you can see supply still is present. So that final bar up into resistance that's a significant bar with good spread, but it can't overcome. It's not a breakout. It's an attempt to break out. And what's an attempt to break out? Well, it's an upthrust, basically. Not very well defined, but it's an upthrust. So after that, there's a pretty significant sell-off, which you can see that takes us down through the support, through my stops, and I'm reading that as a shakeout, but to me, that's a much more well-defined at this point phase C than where my entry was. So I'm getting in phase B, and that's pretty much the story, Roman.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's definitely figure out, what were the issues with this trade. First of all, this was supposed to be a campaign trade, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I think it's really great how we're selecting the stock, because we're looking at the prior uptrend, and it definitely shows us that there is a lot of leadership there. I also like Francis' comment on how demand is deteriorating right here. So momentum is slowing down. Whenever we have this type of slowing down of the momentum on the diminishing demand, then we would be expecting a reaction. And we would say that this reaction would bring us to a change of behavior and potentially a trading range, which we would say that initially we would label as a reaccumulation, to be confirmed, and this is very important, to be confirmed or to fail. So, and then we go through the trading range, and then we're deciding, is the bias still a reaccumulation or not? So with that, as we go through the trading range, what do we see? Okay, first attempt to get out of the trading range right here has some supply behind it. So this bar right here has a hidden supply. We go into the resistance and we are reversing, and then this bar kind of confirms that reversal. I would not, the only thing here to me is that, as you said, Franz, this increase of the supply. But high or low is suggestive that result is diminishing. So I totally understand the logic of thinking that this is phase C. I mean, like, I probably would be doing the same thing. And that's why some of my entries also, are in phase B, as you guys know. So I think what comes next is something that we've already discussed, in previous episodes, and that is two things. If we are in the sign of strength rally, we want to understand what kind of character does this sign of strength rally have. And then also the second thing is, are we having any failures? Failures at the top. So these are the two questions that we should be answering. So as we go up, for instance, Franz, let me just ask you this question. So we have like a local resistance right here. Is the breakout on this bar strong or not?
No, it's not.
Yeah, because the close is just like right on the resistance, right? And plus it shows some emergence of the supply. So we kind of want to notice those type of things. Okay, well then next bar still has some supply behind it, and then we go into the reaction. Okay, so supply is present here. We notice that the answer to the first question is supply is there. Secondly, any type of failures do we have? Failure to overcome the top where previously we had emergence of the supply and the price tanked again. So if that happens again, what would be our behavior? So obviously this is not a sign of strength. If it fails, this is most likely an upthrust. If this is an upthrust, then we are going into a true phase C that could potentially have a lower low. So we are in danger for our stop loss to be triggered on this failure. So the best decision here is, once we see that failure, and it happens probably on this bar for the majority of us, so this is a failure bar, a failed bar, then we're making this decision here. Do we close? Do we trim? Or do we stay? So, Franz, if this would be our logic, like on this bar, what would be the decision? Like let's say just like we know everything right now. Like, how would we behave here? Would you close
Oh,
it?
the decision obviously would be to close the position and wait for a better entry.
Mm-hmm.
And
Or at least trim the position, right? So take
sure,
some off.
yeah. Um, with this is a mental issue that I have, in that I like to own things.
Sure.
So once I've made a commitment to buy this, and I'm thinking, and it does have a nice count. I mean,
Mhm.
and it's got a better count now than it did when I first put the position on. I'm thinking, I want to hold on to this, and that kind of closes my thought process to be able to recognize it's not efficient. It's not efficient at all to hold this after this this upthrust happens, and we've got a clear rejection coming, because like you say, we're probably going to a lower low. Wouldn't it be great to be able to reload at that lower position? It would. I mean, that's the conversation I have to have with myself to kind of get over this mental block that I have of, once you buy something, just hold on to it. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I definitely a very good point here in terms of how we're thinking about the trade, and in terms of the mechanics. Those two things I'm already putting here in the comments and lessons. Character of the sign of strength. Then test of breakout, and then also failure, structural failure of sign of strength and upthrust as well. So I would just concentrate on this front
Mm-hmm.
because we're kind of seeing a commonality of this mistake
Mm-hmm.
in through the analysis, through the trades execution, and so on and so forth. And I would say once we see the failure, uh, one other thought that I had is like if you really want to own and you want to hold on to this could be one half exit. uh, what it does is it reduces your risk uh, to the point where maybe emotionally you would be able to hold on to the trade, to hold on to like a small size. And imagine if this unit is still, because it was opened at such a good price, is still on, right? So even when everything goes down, yes, you have a loss, but you might be thinking, okay, well, it has a demand tail right here. Should I just wait and see what's going to happen next? Next bar comes even with more effort and more result to the upside with this rally, intraday rally. And then the next bar does not have a lot of supply, and the next one is the recovery. So if you could emotionally go through this period, then you could start adding to the position somewhere here and recover, on the way up. The only way how you could do this, you cannot do this with full size. You could
Nope.
do this with just like a small size, like not even half, but maybe like 1/4, 1/3, one
Yep.
fifth size of the position. So sometimes I do that. I know that maybe like I'm in the vicinity of phase C, and I open position somewhere here. So I want this position to be small, and then once I start having confirmations, that's when I would start adding to the position. So I could be off on my initial entry in terms of the timing, but the bias could be correct. And then I want to allow myself to like be in that until it starts confirming. Of course, if it's discontinuing, or its progression to the upside, you want to get out, right away. Um, but give yourself maybe like a chance. But I'd say, Franz, that, character of the sign of strength, test of the breakout, test of any type of supply emergence, and also failure of the sign of strength versus upthrust. So those are kind of like very, very common things that I'm seeing.
I'll put them in my book. I'll put them in my in my lesson book.
Okay, so let's go through the post-analysis bias. I'd say yes. I mean, like, I still feel that this is gonna work out as an bullish bias.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Okay, so timing is obviously no.
Oh,
Okay, character. So what do you think about character?
it was a decent rally, but like you pointed out, and I actually had a buy stop, so I kind of got pulled into the market, and then we got that bit of a pullback there. I don't know. I'd say probably 50-50. Roman, what do you think?
50-50, yeah, sure.
Are you all right
Another
with that?
thought that I had, Franz, here, like these two units that are being opened like one after another. I mean, this would work so well, like right here, right?
Yeah.
So I think maybe it's just the placement. Yeah, we still want to increase the size as we have confirmations on the way up. Okay, points of entry. Probably 50-50 as well for me, because in terms of the local structure, I think that your entries here are quite good, especially the first one. So this was a very impressive entry. The second was a little bit questionable on the character of the close itself, but you were pulled into this. So, okay, 50-50. But in terms of the global entries, right, obviously we want to be in phase C. Stop losses, yes. Add-ons, yes. And then exit. Well, yeah, exit worked, right? So maybe a little bit earlier on the failure here. I would like you to start taking profits a little bit earlier, so maybe like 50-50.
Yeah, just recognize the failure and act on it. I think I do recognize the failure. I just don't want to. I just don't want to take money out of the position, which is just not smart. So, not efficient.
Okay, so we're at what? Surprisingly, we're at 79%. So high variance, but still a losing trade. So sometimes that happens when it seems like we're doing a lot of things correctly and still it produces a mistake. So timing obviously going to be one of those type of mistakes that if we're entering too early and then we go through the, let's say, sprint shakeout and phase C, then it doesn't really matter how closely we're following the trading plan. A mistake on timing would take us out like this. Okay, well, Franz, what are your last final thoughts?
I think you've pretty much done a great job identifying the things I need to work on. So I'm just going to go back and replay this a few times and take those observations and put it,
Yeah, nothing else to do, guys. Just to keep working on this, keep grinding it through. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes. You're gonna make a lot of the same mistakes. We're kind of like seeing this from late episodes. That mistakes are the same and they're being repeated over and over by us. So the main thing is just to define what mistakes are. The commonality of the mistakes, and then start working on them, with the very, very conscious thought. Okay, Franz, well, thank you so much. Great episode, and that's it for today, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon, and that's why post-analysis is so critical.